Hey everybody, it's Lauren DeLisa Coleman for the Inside series here at Filmio, and I'm so excited to bring you another episode during this whole block that we're doing at Tribeca Film Festival, live, boots on the ground. And I have with me now the director of On the Line, the Richard Williams story. This film is getting a lot of buzz during the festival, and I'm so excited to bring you now Stuart McClave, who is going to tell us all about this film and so much more. So, Stuart, thank you so much for taking the time, because I know you are making the rounds and you have a ton of stuff to do, as we all do during the festival. But let's start, as we typically do here at Filmio, with a little bit about this film.
Sure. Thank you for having me, first of all.
My pleasure.
On the Line is a documentary profiling father and coach Richard Williams. Obviously, Venus and Serena is two superstar daughters. It profiles his early days growing up in Shreveport, Louisiana, and kind of retraces his family's journey from the courts in Compton to the grass at Wimbledon, and what happened to the family in the early days when they were coming up on the scene. And I interviewed Mr. Williams several times over the last 2.5 years, and a bunch of people in addition to supplement his story: Billie Jean King, Pam Shriver, Dale Caldwell, Katrina Adams, the former president of the USTA. And I hope that the film will help cement his legacy in a similar way that King Richard did, although King Richard was about a very specific point in Mr. Williams' life until Venus turns pro. And our documentary kind of goes a little bit beyond that to what happens when they did go pro. How did the tennis establishment and the world react? And what's he up to now?
So, yeah, I mean, I think that your film is obviously going to be quite different from King Richard, because, you know, we're talking now about real life and nothing that's been embellished. So I'm first of all really curious to find out, how did this story come to you?
Yeah, I grew up playing competitive tennis. It was kind of my greatest love. Yeah, I mean, I wish I was good enough to be a professional tennis player. I'd probably do that over being a filmmaker, but I wasn't quite there yet. And when I was growing up and playing in Southern California, I would always hear stories about Mr. Williams, and usually they would either begin or end with the word crazy. And that's just like how everyone talked about Mr. Williams. Right. And I didn't quite feel that way. I was the biggest fan of Venus and Serena and their parents, and I would force my dad to drive me hundreds of miles to see them play for any tournament. That's what I wanted to go see, was Venus and Serena. And I was also a huge Federer fan, but anyway, when I did more research on Mr. Williams, I realized that actually he wasn't crazy, and it was just kind of this notion that the media and the tennis establishment cooked up because they didn't understand someone like Mr. Williams or his methods, and he refused to play by rules that really weren't designed for him. And so about 2.5 or 3 years ago, I kind of got into this rabbit hole researching his story online, and I was like, how is there not a feature documentary about Mr. Williams? And at that time, I was producing unscripted series at the time, or commercials, and I just needed to help tell this story. And I got in contact with the family right before the pandemic hit, and I flew out to Palm Beach and sat down with Mr. Williams for several hours and introduced myself and told him why I felt that his story needed to be told in a documentary. At that time, I didn't even know actually that King Richard was in the works. And we really hit it off, and there was a lot of chemistry there, because we both had this kind of encyclopedic knowledge of tennis, and both the pros and cons of the tennis establishment in the world and all of that. And so it kind of went from there, and we developed a relationship over the next several years, and now we're here premiering at Tribeca.
Wow, I love this. And I don't think that you would have been able to create such a relationship had you not had all that wonderful tennis experience, because, it brings credibility, right?
Yeah.
So you were just really moved to be able to do this. Talk to me a little bit about the journey of, I guess, both interviewing him, going through so much archival footage and more. How did you decide really what route to take? Because you don't want to just, like you said, play into the stereotypes around his personality. And, he's always, the word vilified is always used, in the media. So, but of course you don't want to kind of put him in some kind of supernatural kind of level. How did you kind of decide the voice and the approach?
Yeah. Well, I really wanted him to tell his story in his own words, so that was really important to me. I didn't want it to feel like I was telling his story. Like I knew just from doing research and scrubbing through thousands of hours of interviews with him that there were certain topics that he felt the most passionate about. And then obviously sitting down with him several times for interviews, those topics kept coming up. So I knew that there were certain moments in his life that were very, very important to his story. So I tried to really hone in on that when I was crafting the outline for the film. And so some of those key moments, growing up in Shreveport, Louisiana, dealing with racism from very early age, dealing with the KKK, how those early experiences shaped him, how his mom influenced him. She was kind of a single mother of 5 children, and she picked cotton. And, you know, he still to this day, every time he mentions his mother, he will cry. And so that obviously I wanted to focus a lot on his mother, a lot on how he was raised and how he was brought up and how he passed on some of the lessons that he learned from his mother onto Venus and Serena, and how that kind of shaped history ultimately. And so that was a huge part for me. And then I also realized that there were certain key moments like Indian Wells tournament in 2001 where the family was booed, and that was a very painful memory for a lot of people. And I knew that that was also an important moment of the film. So I just kind of, through conversations with him, started to craft, you know, what were the story we were going to tell, what's the beginning, middle, and end. And that's just how it dictated, you know, the making of the film.
Wow. How long did it take you from kind of beginning to end?
Yeah.
Not maybe the earlier talks, but when you really started to get into the
Yeah.
meat of this film?
Well, we were shut down because of COVID. So we started right before I filmed my first interviews, right before COVID happened. And then we were going to shoot the Miami Open. And that was actually, because that's the only tournament that Mr. Williams goes to this day, because it's close to where he lives in Florida. And then that was one of the first tournaments that shut down during COVID. So didn't do that. And obviously it was very important for all of us in the crew to keep Mr. Williams safe during the pandemic and healthy. So we really stopped down for a while. And then we started shooting again in August of 2021 when vaccines were out and we were all vaccinated and masked up. And then it felt a little safer to finish the interviews and finish filming with him. And we went with him to Shreveport, Louisiana, and walked around where he grew up in the Cedar Grove neighborhood. So it's been a long process, probably about 3.5 years since I started it.
It takes a lot of dedication to be able to pull that off. Talk to me a little bit about the editing process.
Yeah.
Because then you have all of this footage, and
Yeah.
if you're like me, coming from a writing background, you want to use all of it, and obviously
Yeah.
you can't, right?
Yeah.
So how did you go about really being quite selective to tell a tight and a really emotional story?
Yeah, the archival process to me is one of my favorites because
really?
Yeah, the thing about Mr. Williams and Venus and Serena in general are they've been filmed their whole lives pretty much. Mr. Williams not really until the Compton years, but
By the way, I love how you refer to him as Mr. Williams.
oh.
So you don't call him by his first name.
No, not really. Yeah.
That shows a lot of reverence. I think that's very interesting. I like that.
Thank you. But I just, he's given so many interviews over the years, and he has so much conviction from, you know, the minute the media started paying attention to him, he just had so much conviction and so much to say, and would call out the tennis world is racist very early on. And this was in the 90s and early 2000s when people were like, is he playing the race card? Like, what is he talking about? Tennis is a progressive sport. But, you know, he saw it for what it is. He saw that there were ways that the media and the tennis world were talking about Venus and Serena that were very different from the way they were talking about the other white players. And so for me, I really was able, there were certain moments where I was like, okay, this is definitely going in the film. Mm-hmm. It's like an interview where something happened. A reporter questioned Venus's confidence, and he stepped in there and set him straight, you know, and that interview has kind of gone viral, but no one's really seen kind of the full lead up to that interview and what exactly was said. So I knew that moment was going to go in there. Then we found some home videos in the Compton courts where they were practicing, and he's telling Venus and Serena to get in their face. And he's like, okay, get in their face. And he's hitting balls. And I had never seen anything like that before, and I've devoured every single documentary that Venus or Serena has ever done. So for me, I was like, okay, that's going in there. And then the rest of it was really about contextualizing the moments that I knew that were very important to Mr. Williams. So the build up to Indian Wells tournament, what happened, what were the accusations and the rumors of match fixing that led to the crowd turning on the family. And when we kind of fine-tuned how that would look in archival, it was pretty obvious what would make the cut and what wouldn't make the cut. So it was a fun process. I had a lot of support. Rebecca Kent was our archival producer, and she worked very, very hard with her researchers and assistants to find the best materials. So that was it was a fun process, and when you're licensing it later, it's very
Not
annoying.
fun.
But yeah, and very expensive.
Right.
But before that, it was fun to just see Mr. Williams develop throughout the years, and like how yet he was developing, yet his voice kind of stayed the same. Like he was always very determined, and he always had, very strong convictions about what he believed and how America was and all of that. And I just really wanted to make sure that that was tracking from the start of the film till the end.
So now what in your professional background do you think was most helpful to you in pulling off this amazing project?
Well, I'd worked in unscripted and documentaries and development throughout the years, so that definitely helped.
Right.
I also studied journalism and film at USC, and the journalism background I think probably helped maybe the most because there was a lot of research that went into this project, and I actually had spent a semester at USC reporting in Compton, so I knew the city pretty well already. And so it was nice to kind of go back and revisit it and film there and film interviews there and talk to some of the key figures that grew up watching Venus and Serena play on those courts. And they're not voices that you necessarily hear all the time when you're talking about Venus or Serena because they're not famous really. But it was amazing to just hear like how hard that they worked every single day, how the whole family was picking up balls on the tennis court, and just to know like when you see it now, what happened after that. I mean, these are two of the most successful, inspirational people in the world who have come so far. So
It must feel very gratifying to be able to bring this here, not only from a filmmaker perspective, but I mean, I can see that it's very personal, as well as somebody who just loves the sport.
Yeah.
So being here, what do you think about it? I mean, what do you hope that audiences take away? This has a number of screenings, so that's really great. But what do you kind of just are hoping?
I mean, I hope it resonates with, the people who watch the film. Obviously, I'm hoping that it creates some buzz, that more people will watch it. And because what I'm really hoping is that I think Mr. Williams has a greater legacy that needs to be appreciated, needs to be understood. And I think more and more people can learn from people like him that have really broken a lot of rules to get to where they are. And we should all kind of evaluate the rules that he broke, whether they should be rules that are in place or whether they actually were like barriers for entry for a lot of people. And I think that ultimately, I hope obviously people are moved by his story. I definitely was when I was talking to him and interviewing him. And yeah, I guess that's it.
I think that that's great, and I think it's very cool that there are films like yours that are, being part of the festival this year. I had a chance to watch, of course, the Colin Kaepernick documentary. I guess it was, who knows what day it is now in the festival.
Right.
But again, that is also examining rules in a much larger sense of like how do we conduct ourselves when we're in certain roles, and the previous person in those roles has always been a certain way, but it doesn't fit for you. And sometimes maybe because you're of color or you have different values or whatever, and what that's like on so many different levels. And you just, you can't even imagine those types of things. And I guess the wherewithal that you have to have as a person to even begin to go through that, whether you're talking about Cap or certainly like Richard Williams, you don't get to that level unless there's something in your personality which just says not on my watch.
Exactly,
from probably 4 or 5 years old. So I just think that that's very cool that you could really go through that with him, and I hope that he appreciates it as well.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, he's very excited about Tribeca and the
Is he?
film coming out. Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So, I guess just maybe on like the fan side, are there any films here that you can't wait to see or any talks?
Yeah, I mean, I really like this documentary Subject. I haven't seen it yet, but it evaluates, I really want to see it. It evaluates how subjects of documentaries, it kind of turns the lens on to the filmmakers and what is that relationship, what happens when a camera's on you, and how does that affect your story and whatnot. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. There's another one about like an AI robot. I think it's called Sophia.
Oh yeah, I've seen that at other
Oh, you
festivals
have?
before.
Oh,
But
great.
yeah, you should like that.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that as well. And there's a lot of great films here. I mean, I
Absolutely.
think 100 plus films.
I
so
know it's like not enough time to
Not
see
enough
like
time.
everything you're trying to like
Exactly.
juggle and well maybe I could watch this one
Yeah.
at like at home and
Yeah.
you know online and this and that. It's very very challenging, but that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's great.
So now what are you going to be doing next, or is the main focus, you know, on
Yeah.
just building this out further, or are you already in progress, anything in pre-production?
No. This is kind of this has been 3.5 years, and I
So
just
you're
want
gonna
to
ride
like
this out, right?
Yeah, just like really want to make sure that this film gets a lot of, hopefully Mr. Williams gets some attention from this. His legacy is helped cemented by this, and then figuring out the next project after that. But still laser focused on
Great.
this one. Yeah.
That's great, because I know a lot of times like people are already juggling the next 2 or 3 projects,
Yeah.
and that's cool if it
Yeah.
feels organic. But I think there's no harm in like being
Yeah.
like, you know what, this is the project right now, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
I guess just finally, how can we keep up with you and whatever you'll be doing next? Are you active on social? Have
Yeah.
a site for the film, etc.?
Yeah, we're getting there. Not quite. I'm not as socially savvy as some of my counterparts,
okay.
but I do have an Instagram. It's just my name, Stuart McClave, and then yeah, that's it for now. I'm gonna try to get a little bit more active.
I think like you should.
I just want the
do what
film to
feels
speak
right.
for
'Cause you know
itself.
what the
Yeah.
worst is? You have 8 million platforms and like none of them are updated.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
just stick
yeah.
with the one
I
if
only
that
have
like
one
works.
that I need to update, but yes.
The whole idea is like moving
Yeah.
toward it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Anything else you want to add before we wrap up, Stuart?
No, thank you so much.
Okay.
This was a lot of
My
fun.
pleasure. Thank you so much for taking
Yeah.
the time. You guys, I hope that you have enjoyed this. It's always very nice to just kind of see behind the scenes on projects that are just like really out there and have so much buzz. It is an honor to be able to bring these to you, and I hope that you will click on the very next one. I am Lauren DeLisa Coleman for the Inside series here at Filmio. Thank you so much for watching.